MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is investigative award-winning reporter Bob Mackin, publisher of TheBreaker.News. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
China issuing a warning to its citizens, don't travel to Canada, you could face arbitrary arrest. Is that true, and do they?
I haven't heard of that happening at all. That happens routinely in China. This is just part of the tit-for-tat war of words between China and Canada after the arrest at Vancouver International Airport December 1st of Huawei Chief Financial Officer Meng Wanzhou, who has been called in Chinese social media the Huawei Princess. And that nickname isn't that far off the truth. She essentially is part of corporate royalty in China, and by being the chief financial officer and the daughter of the founder of China's most important telecommunications technology company that has spread around the world, you could say she is essentially a princess in what is now China Incorporated. Of course, China hasn't been an imperial country since the revolution, way back when Mao overthrew the royalty, but you could look at it from that lens now and say that it's kind of a corporate police state that is modeled on the imperial days of old, because Xi Jinping, the president, is basically president for life after term limits were scrapped last year. And there aren't very many women at all in senior roles. There aren't any women in the Politburo, the inner circle of power in Beijing. So you could say that, yes, Meng Wanzhou is the Huawei Princess, and we're only seeing how valuable she is to the Chinese government and how valuable Huawei is to the Chinese government by the actions that they've taken. First, verbally, the threats that they were going to make Canada pay for what it did for arresting her. And they followed through on that by arbitrarily arresting Michael Spavor, Michael Kovrig, by arresting the diplomat, and by arresting the businessman, by putting an Abbotsford fella who had been charged with drug crimes and convicted and sent to jail for 15 years, Robert Schellenberg, basically retrying him and sentencing him to death this week. Very, very serious matter there. He basically had a one-day trial, which is kind of interesting that Meng Wanzhou had more days of her bail hearing than he had in court for his trial on very serious charges of drug trafficking. While he may be guilty of sin, may be guilty of the charges as stated, did he get a fair trial? And by our standards here in the West, absolutely not. So now he's facing death. The government of Canada has asked for clemency, and they've been rejected. And Ed Fast, the Abbotsford Conservative MP, has gone public and said that Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, should get on the phone immediately with Xi Jinping, the president of China, and demand that his sentence be commuted, demand that the death penalty not be used in this case, because it is very arbitrary. But here in Canada, I'm not aware of any cases where any Chinese citizens have been charged at all in arbitrary means. If there's anyone out there listening that has heard of any injustice against any Chinese tourist or any Chinese immigrant to Canada, please contact me. I'd love to hear if there has been an injustice. I haven't heard of any such injustice, but if it's slipped through the cracks and not been heard at all, please tell me. I'd love to report on it, because I reported on the Meng Wanzhou bail hearings, And our authorities bent over backwards to make sure that that was as open and transparent as possible. And of course, her bail conditions, however strict they may be, she's living very comfortably in Dunbar. And she has, of course, round-the-clock security, deemed a potential flight risk. Passports taken away, but she's living comfortably at home in the house that she bought with her husband back in 2009. And they're also renovating a house, a mansion in Shaughnessy, which is coincidentally a couple doors down from the U.S. consulate mansion. She's able to live as free as possible within Lower Mainland, get out of her house. She's able to sleep when she wants, turn out lights when she wants. You can't say that about people who are rotting away in Chinese jails. And interestingly enough, there's some wire service story today that her father, Ren Zhengfei, the founder of Huawei, has actually gone public and said, thank you to the Canadian authorities for treating his daughter as well as they did. And of course, during the bail hearings, the lawyer for Meng Wanzhou did not make any complaints at all to the judge in open court about her treatment. He did say that she does have some pre-existing health conditions that are not perhaps best dealt with in jail, even though he said that the people that do work in jails do their best with what they can. But there was no complaint at all about her treatment. There was some hyperbole by various groups of people in Vancouver who are closely tied to the consulate and very loyal to Beijing, claiming that her human rights had been disrespected and that she should be treated under Chinese law. But again, that was more hyperbole, more baloney, because that just was not true. So it's this tit for tat, almost Cold War we're facing between Canada and China right now. We do know that the federal and the BC tourism marketing authorities are paring back their marketing to China at this time. It is a bit of a difficult time because China is warning its citizens to maybe not travel to Canada, maybe not be tourists to Canada. We'll see if that actually does translate to less business at local tourism hotspots and hotels and restaurants, because China has become one of the most important destinations for visitors. It overtook Japan several years ago and now is a major driver of tourism in British Columbia, where, of course, tourism from the United States is still the top destination, but tourists from China are buying expensive hotels. They're sometimes buying houses when they come here and buying cars. The 10-year visas have certainly opened the door to that. And definitely we'll see a decline in the tourism industry if it does carry on, or if China ratchets up its rhetoric. That will perhaps throw a bit of a challenge to the British Columbia government to market tourism more to our American neighbors, and also encourage British Columbians to travel around the province more. But we'll see if that does happen. Tourism in British Columbia really was transformed with the 2010 Winter Olympics, because that really was the legacy that the Olympics in Vancouver in 2010 were the most seen Olympics on the winter side in China ever, because of a new broadcast deal they did with the International Olympic Committee, and also because it was the first Olympics after Beijing hosted the Summer Olympics, and it happened during Chinese New Year in 2010. A lot of people were at home with their families and were watching TV, looking at the internet, reading the newspapers, and what did they see? They saw images of bright blue skies and spring-like and sometimes even summer-like weather in Vancouver. It put Vancouver on the map for a lot of Chinese that didn't know much about Vancouver before, and we saw what happened after that from a tourism and real estate standpoint. That was really the legacy of the Vancouver Olympics, was the investment from China. For good, for bad, and for the ugly. Now we've got a situation where the Chinese government is ratcheting up this rhetoric in this political game. Where it ends, don't know, but those of us who observed the situation in court in December with Meng Wanzhou, and who have read all the evidence that was presented in court, published stories about it, and who've done our homework about Huawei, says that so far the American government seems to have an interesting case about potential fraud that does deserve to be tried. We'll see if by the end of this month that they submit their fulsome case against her, because she does have a date in court, February 6th in Vancouver, to set a date for the extradition hearings against her. The American government has to file a more fulsome case than they already have. There is some evidence there that does suggest that there is a question that needs to be answered in court, that she does need to answer to her role as chief financial officer, and whether these charges of fraud are legitimate regarding her representations to banks in the United States with regard to Huawei doing business in Iran against the trade embargo by using what the U.S. government says was a dummy company called Skycom. So this is something that is taking Canada into uncharted territory. We haven't had a situation like this where we've been facing such a diplomatic trouble with another foreign government, especially a government as large and as important as China. Also a government that does not share Canada's values when it comes to freedom of speech, human rights, and democracy.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, an audit has found smart meters and the people who manage them really not all that smart. What's the deal there?
Well, BC Hydro spent a lot of money. They say $930 million on installing the smart meters. $1.9 million of these devices around the province at residences and businesses and other places. Still about 45,000 people said no, and they have meters that are read manually. Well, they spent all this money and got the system going, and there wasn't really a smooth transition. I was able to get through BC Hydro's Freedom of Information Office an internal audit that was done back in October. They also hired a subject matter expert from a consultancy in Boston to look at how the smart meter program had been managed. And they said that it has not been managed very well so far, that they split up the smart meter program across 4 different departments. So the decision-making and prioritizing of the program and of its systems and daily operations is really done in silos. They said it results in, this is the language of the auditors, inconsistent objectives. That, quote, there is no long-term strategy to realize additional value from the investment in smart meters. So we spent all this money on this mechanism that BC Hydro said would be more efficient, enhance customer service, reduce electricity theft, make the whole grid more reliable. And they haven't gone in that direction to actually realize that. It doesn't say this in this report, but of course we know that BC Hydro's big priority now is building Site C. And of course, the NDP's other priority is to improve affordability. That's the mandate that the NDP came in with, although that kind of backfired because we're getting BC Hydro rate increases, even though the NDP said that they were going to freeze them. The Utilities Commission approved rate increases. So we've got BC Hydro in a bit of flux, with this system that was promising the moon, and they haven't quite delivered. BC Hydro, in response, says that they are correcting the firmware upgrades They're enhancing data filtering to better integrate smart metering and especially the outage management system. By the end of this year, they said they're going to do that, and that they've identified a lead to ensure that they're leveraging data analytics so that they've put someone in a position to try to tie all these things together. This is something they really should have done at the start, that they should have planned better transition to operations so that an audit like this wouldn't come out. The outage management system is very key. That's one of the things that they sold us on, was that if there are power outages because of the smart meters, they'll be able to identify where the problems are quicker and be able to get people back on the power grid faster. And we saw that that wasn't exactly the case with the December 20th windstorm. That was quite severe, especially on the south coast, where people on Gulf Islands, some of the people on Gulf Islands went through Christmas without power. So this is BC Hydro again, our electricity monopoly, facing so many different challenges, and I think that this is a bit of an indictment of the management. Of course, we had a management change when the NDP came into power in July 2017, with Jessica McDonald being fired, and with Chris O'Reilly, her number 2, being elevated to the presidency. This audit again was done in October of last year, and it again looked at the NDP's very busy trying to make things more affordable. Of course, big debate about that being a bit of a flop. But there is a bit of a legacy here of the BC Liberals, who really, it was late 2014, as the smart meter program was well underway. That's when they rubber stamped and greenlit Site C. So even before smart meters were fully installed, they changed their priorities to the next mega project, which was Site C. So this appears to be a problem that was caused late in the BC Liberals' mandate, and has not been fixed early in the NDP's mandate.
Any mention of the fire report from the BC Coalition Against Smart Meters, where they documented dozens of suspected fires caused by smart meters?
It doesn't mention that, and of course that is definitely a debate there that hasn't been fully solved, at least to my satisfaction. I know that there was a fire at a farm in Langley where a number of standard-bred racehorses died several years ago, and I was tipped by a source that the fire was caused by a smart meter. I've never gotten anyone to say no, and no confirmation about it. I FOI'd the fire commissioner records, and doesn't appear to be any provincially. And normally, whenever there is a major fire, the fire marshal records go to the Solicitor General's ministry for the provincial fire commissioner to file away. And I thought that was rather strange. Of course, Langley, one of the ridings in Langley is represented by Rich Coleman, who was deputy premier at the time and has also been the minister in charge of BC Hydro. Don't really know what was happening there. I've still got major questions about that, about whether that was the case there. And I think it's something that's been understudied. Again, if there's anyone out there who does have any proof that can take me forward, please get in contact with me, Bob at thebreaker.news, or find me on Twitter. Thebreaker.news is the handle. I'd love to see some brown paper envelopes, and even digital brown paper envelopes, which might have some information that can push me forward on those stories, so I can get things confirmed.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and Canada. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol ASDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Okay, for that, let's start again.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, what's the latest on the legislative scandal in BC involving the Sergeant-at-Arms and comments made by the Speaker of the House?
Well, coming up January 21st, Monday. Of course, Sunday is a big day. The NFL conference finals, Sunday. Well, Monday, January 21st, tune in midday. That's when the Legislative Assembly Management Committee is supposed to meet in Victoria. And that's when Darryl Plecas, the Speaker, has vowed to tell, not all, but a lot, as much as he can tell, about what led to him calling in the RCMP. He's saying that he is going to present some information that will enlighten us about what led to the suspension with pay suddenly and immediately back on November 20th of Craig James, the clerk of the legislature, and Gary Lenz, the sergeant-at-arms of the legislature. An unprecedented move that they were walked out of the building and after the legislature unanimously voted to suspend them over what has been a bit of a cryptic situation. Remember, on November 20th, the RCMP did admit that there was an investigation, and the Public Prosecution Service also admitted there was an investigation, and that a few months before, they had actually been asked by the RCMP for the appointment of a special prosecutor. And in an extremely rare move, there were two special prosecutors appointed because of the potential size and complexity and scope of the investigation. So we're going to find out more about the situation. We did, of course, see that news conference that the week after the suspensions happened, where Craig James and Gary Lenz, they hired a PR company in Vancouver, and they were at their lawyer's office, and they said that they did no wrong, and they wanted to know more about this, and they wanted the jobs back. Well, they haven't got their jobs back, and we might know more about the situation. I don't know if we'll find out more about what's going on the criminal side, the investigation side yet, but we should know more. I mean, I've been doing some research in the last couple of months to look at the Legislative Assembly itself. The problem with this is they spend about $76 million a year net, and it's an entity which is actually deliberately excluded from the Freedom of Information law. We have no right to know how our money is being spent at the legislature. And it is the 21st century. And it appears that that is the root of the problem here, that there may have been some spending on expenses and contracting, which may have caused Darryl Plecas, the Speaker, to take a closer look at things and call in the RCMP. I mean, I found various six-figure contracts with various IT companies. I saw that, the spending on travel, they do release quarterly numbers, but for the clerk of the legislature and for the sergeant-at-arms, deputy clerk, and the chief financial officer, they just issue top-line numbers. They don't say what they spent the money on, except to say it's either in the column of travel expenses or even miscellaneous. I asked Kate Ryan Lloyd, who's the interim clerk, who took over after Craig James was suspended, to tell me more about what Craig James and Gary Lenz spent our money on last year, and she wouldn't give me any details. She said she was going to get some legal advice. I thought that was a bit of a lame excuse, because, again, that's our money, and there's a cloud over their head because of the secrecy in which they spent our money. There were trips to China. There was a trip to see the legislators in Guangdong. That's where Darryl Plecas, as well as Roger Johan, the deputy speaker, as well as Craig James, went last June. There was also a trip in August to London. Apparently, Craig James was there with his family. And I asked the deputy clerk, or the interim clerk, if any money was spent on the family, and she couldn't really say, except to say that the policy was that they shouldn't. There's also an interesting difference that our MLAs have credit cards issued by the government that do not allow them to collect frequent flyer points, but if they use their own credit card and then bill the government for their expenses, when it comes to collecting frequent flyer points, they can't collect it for their own purpose. They have to donate it, and they cannot benefit from it. But there is no such policy when it comes to the senior executives from the legislature. So did Craig James rack up frequent flyer points on our dime and then use those frequent flyer points to benefit for his travel or the travel for his family? That's another reasonable question. Maybe we'll find out on Monday. We'll see what the All-Party Committee has to say when this is presented by Darryl Plecas. And again, he vowed back in December he wanted full transparency. He wants the committee to okay some forensic audits. He said he'd even put his own spending under audit. He says that he's done no wrong himself. And in fact, he says he's there to guard taxpayers' money and guard the honor of the institution. We'll see if the party does, or the all-party committee does greenlight those audits. But at the same time, we're finding out more because of some interesting documents that I was able to obtain regarding how Plecas actually became the ex-BC Liberal and became the independent speaker. We know, because I was first to report back in August 2017, how he stood up to Christy Clark in the Penticton caucus meeting, the first one after the government fell. The NDP took over and the Liberals found themselves in opposition. Well, Darryl Plecas went to Penticton and he challenged the authority of the leader. He stood up at the Penticton caucus retreat and challenged Clark to quit. And he threatened to quit himself if she didn't do it. And I found out that there was a lot going on behind the scenes. Plecas was convinced to cool it for 24 hours, but in the meantime, he actually produced a news release that he was going to send out, a 6-paragraph news release that explained the reason why he was going to become an independent and leave the BC Liberals. And that reason in the original version of the news release was that Christy Clark's idea to start the comeback for the BC Liberals was to fire all the constituency office staff and replace them with BC Liberal political staff. Now, constituency offices, according to the rules of the legislature, are supposed to be non-partisan. They're supposed to be there to serve the people, not to serve the party. And that was the plan, and Plecas didn't want to fire his constituency assistant and install someone from the party whose job was to campaign for the party and to undermine the NDP government. He said he believed in service to his constituents and proper spending of their money. So now we know that for the first time because of the story I published exclusively in the Breaker this week. Now, of course, he did take that 24 hours. There was a different version of the news release that was ready to go on July 28th. That one didn't include the paragraph about the politicization of constituency offices. He actually notified the legislature that he was quitting the caucus, becoming an independent. But lo and behold, minutes after that happened, according to my source, Christy Clark sent her resignation in. So she beat him to the punch. He rescinded the news release. And, of course, he did talk to other media, the Abbotsford News, after I published my story in August 2017 about the situation that he was facing. Then, less than a month later, he became the independent speaker of the legislature. He was already in a bit of the doghouse after the election. He spoke frankly on the night of the election, May 9, 2017, when the BC Liberals lost their majority. He basically said that there was a perception in the public that the party, while it was in government, had become very arrogant and lost touch with voters. He didn't really believe that was so from his perspective, but he said that that's the tone that he got from voters was that the party had lost touch and it needed to go back to its basics, back to its roots. Well, someone at party head office heard that, and it was obvious that he was already on the outs with the party when the legislature opened for the session that led to the throne speech and led to the fall of the government. He was placed in the worst possible seat in the legislature, right next to the door, just across the aisle from the Green Party members. So you can see a photo of that in the Breaker.news in my story. So we've got this very interesting situation of an independent speaker who does not need a party leader to sign his his nomination papers for the next election should he decide to run again. Therefore, he really is able to chart his own course. And that course, a key milestone in that will be on Monday, January 21st in Victoria, the Legislative Assembly Management Committee, when it meets and hears some details about why we are faced with a situation at the legislature today.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us. My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of the Breaker.news. If you have any questions for Bob or for any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.